Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 28th of October of 2025. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Russia. Today we got lots of very interesting updates and details. Today the Russians stated that the French General Staff is preparing to deploy a military contingent of up to 2,000 soldiers and officers to Ukraine to assist Kiev, according to the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia. They are already stationed in areas of Poland bordering Ukraine and are undergoing intensive combat training. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that today we got another very interesting and aggressive statement made by Zelensky. Today he said that Russian oil refineries will pay an even higher price. At the headquarters, a decision was made to expand the geography of strikes by Ukrainian long-range weapons on the territory of Russia. So we see that we have more and more aggressive statements and actions from Ukraine and the Western countries. Macron most likely will deploy troops in Ukraine in 2026. And the question is why Zelensky and the Western leaders are doing this. And probably the answer to this question we can find in the areas of the city of Pokrovsk and the city of Kupiansk. I would like to remind you that several days ago the Russians reported that both agglomerations were encircled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And today we got additional details from the Minister of Defense regarding the situation on the ground. The Russians reported that they continued encircling the Ukrainians on the territory of the Kupiansk agglomeration. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians carried out several counterattacks from the village by the name of Nechvolodovka, and most likely the Ukrainians were attacking in the direction of the western part of the city of Kupiansk. But the Russians are saying that both attacks were repelled by Russia. Ukrainians suffered huge losses. In this video we can see how Ukrainians were trying to bring additional forces and their vehicle was completely destroyed. In this video we can see another episode how Ukrainians were trying to bring additional reinforcements as close as possible to the line of combat contact, but everything was destroyed in the Kupiansk Killzone. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly on the territory of the village by the name of Petropavlovka. The Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours, they managed to capture 40 buildings. So, as for now, we don't know for sure which buildings the Russians managed to secure and to capture, but obviously the village of Petropavlovka is the current task of the group of forces west. First, they will try to take this settlement under complete control with the purpose to get as close as possible to the eastern and the central parts of the city of Kupiansk and the entire Kupiansk agglomeration. The Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours suffered huge losses. Just during attempt to unblock Ukrainians on the eastern bank of the river Oskol, the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers. Furthermore, as for this entire Kharkiv direction, the Russians managed to improve their positions along the border in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv Oblast. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to connect two bridgeheads, one along the border and another one along the river of Oskol. This information during the previous 24 hours was provided by neutral mappers. Now we see that the Russians are tasked to finish the battle for the settlement of Dvorechenskaya and to expand this foothold even bigger. Furthermore, the neutral mappers report that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the western part of the city of Volchansk. Some sources, I would like to remind you that some sources, yes, they reported that the Russians have already captured the settlement of Sinelnikova, but as of now, this information hasn't been confirmed by anybody. Anyway, we see that the Russians continue advancing in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region, and Ukrainians currently can't do anything with this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue hunting, attacking and destroying Ukrainian vehicle and logistic. In this video, for example, we can see how Russians managed to discover another track along another supply line and to destroy this track with FPV drone. Another video shows us the situation in the city of Drobyshevo itself. Here we can see another vehicle and another position of the armed forces of Ukraine that was discovered by the armed forces of the Russian Federation and destroyed with FPV drone. So as you can see, the situation here is very difficult. Ukrainians can't bring additional forces and reinforcements in this direction through the river of Oskol because Russians control everything with FPV drones. At the same time, the Russians continue advancing, and during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in the area of Svetogorsk forest. So this is the situation by the end of the 27th of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October. Furthermore, the Russians are taking in pincers the settlement of Stavki. The Russians during the previous weeks managed to improve their positions to the west of the village. Currently, we see that the Russians began advancing from the east and the southeast of the settlement. So it seems that in coming days, this village will be captured by Russia, and then most likely Russians will begin offensive operation in the direction of the city of Liman from the north. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that there are very heavy clashes for the road between the city of Liman and the settlement of Yampol. We are talking about this territory. I would like to remind you that several days ago, some pro-Russian sources reported that the road was already cut by Russians physically. Today we got additional clarification. The Russians managed to cut the road somewhere in this area. So currently the situation on the ground looks like this. So this is the situation in this area. Furthermore, these Russian sources are saying that currently the armed forces of the Russian Federation are trying to outflank this stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine also from the northwest. And this is approximately the task of the armed forces of the Russian Federation for the next days. So it seems that Russians are trying to capture this entire supply line, and from this position the Russians can advance further in the southwestern direction towards the settlement of Dibrova. This can lead to complete collapse of the entire defense of the armed forces of Ukraine between the cities of Slaviansk and Siversk, because from the settlement of Dibrova and from this surrounding forest, Russians will be able to establish complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines that go through the settlement of Raya Alexandrovka from the west in the eastern direction. The Russians have already established complete FPV drone control over some territories. In this video we can see how Ukrainians sent additional vehicle through the settlement of Ozerna in the direction of the settlement of Yampol, but the vehicle was immediately destroyed as the vehicle was discovered. Here we can see another episode about the same story. Ukrainians sent another vehicle with the purpose to support their forces, but the vehicle was completely damaged and destroyed. And when the vehicle was destroyed, another drone of the armed forces of the Russian Federation entered the perimeter to control it. So this is the situation in this area. I would like to remind you that most likely the Ukrainians are using this, let's say, logistic road through the settlement of Kriva Luka, then further in the northern direction to the settlement of Ozerna, and then further in the northern direction toward the settlement of Yampol. So all these videos confirm Russians control this logistic road, and Ukrainians on the territory of the settlement of Yampol have no supply and support from the mainland. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Konstantinovka. During the previous 24 hours, significant changes on the ground were recorded. So as you can see, the situation in front of your screens is the situation by the end of the 28th of October. The Russians began their major offensive operation in the area of the city of Konstantinovka somewhere around on the 24th of October of 2025. So this is the situation by that date. The sources reported that 1st Sabotage and Reconnaissance groups managed to enter the settlement, but without confirmations. By the end of the 25th of October, we received a first geolocation. So this video was published by Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of Russians in the southeastern part of the settlement. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. We colored the first block of the city of Konstantinovka in Russian favor. By the end of the 28th of October, we got another video, additional video published by Ukrainian sources. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of armed forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of the city of Konstantinovka in its southeastern part as well. So attacks took place exactly in this area. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that Russians managed to enter the southeastern part of the settlement from another side as well. So currently the clashes are taking place for this triangle. So this is the territory between roads, between T0516 road and N32 road. The Russians are tasked to capture this corner of the city of Konstantinovka, and then from this corner the Russians will continue advancing further in many directions, trying to cut the city of Konstantinovka into many pieces. Furthermore, the Russians activated to the south of water reservoir of Kliban-Bytskaya water reservoir. According to different mappers, this territory was completely captured by Russians by the end of the 28th of October of 2025. Now we are moving to the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation gave us additional update about the situation in the Pokrovsk Cauldron. Today, the Russians stated that during the previous 24 hours, the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their position significantly. Furthermore, Ukrainians were trying to counterattack with the purpose to unblock Ukrainians that were encircled in the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and according to Russians, few groups of Ukrainian forces were trying to escape this cauldron but were completely destroyed. So let's discuss everything in details. So the Russians are saying that they managed to improve their positions in the southeastern part of the settlement of Mirnograd. So the Russians cleared and captured completely the mine of Dmitrieva, so this territory. Furthermore, today we got first video that confirms that Russians made attempt to attack the Pokrovsk, the Mirnograd citadel. So this is the video, and here we can see how an armored vehicle, an infantry fighting carrier of the armored forces of the Russian Federation, was entering this micro district, the micro district of the city of Mirnograd, and how Ukrainians were attacking Russian fighting vehicle with FPV drones. So these episodes and this attack took place exactly in this area. As of now, as of the end of the 28th of October of 2025, we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to capture buildings and constructions on the territory of Mirnograd. We don't know this, but the sources are saying that the Russians managed to do this. Now we are waiting for additional details, but it seems that the battle for the Mirnograd citadel has begun. Right before this attack, the Russians launched a massive artillery preparation. Basically, they were trying to reduce this micro district to ruins, trying to damage as many as possible Ukrainian positions, and right after this attack, the Russians began assault operation. Furthermore, according to neutral mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly in the central part of the city of Pokrovsk in the area of the railway station. So these territories were captured by Russians according to neutral mappers. So this is the situation in the city of Pokrovsk in its northern part. So as we can see, the situation is getting worse and worse for Ukrainians. Furthermore, the Russians stated that during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians were trying to counterattack from the area of the settlement of Grishina, but those counterattacks were repelled. Ukrainians suffered losses and were forced to fall back. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that Ukrainians were trying to escape this cauldron in the northern direction, most likely through the settlement by the name of Rodinska. But this attempt failed. The Russians attacked Ukrainians who were trying to escape this cauldron, and the Russians are saying that during this attempt, Ukrainians lost up to 180 soldiers. So once again, I would like to remind you that 2 days ago, the Russians reported that there were 5,500 soldiers, so 2 days ago. And now we see that Ukrainians have already lost more than 200 soldiers just for 2 days. So as I would like to remind, and I would say that in coming 10 days, Ukrainians can lose a critical mass of their soldiers on the territory of agglomeration. And then a turning point in the battle for the city of Pokrovsk and the Kupiansk agglomeration will begin and will start and will happen. Furthermore, Ukrainians are trying to counterattack to the northeast of the city of Pokrovsk. Ukrainians are attacking for a third day in a row, and during the previous 24 hours, Ukrainians once again managed to improve their positions. The Ukrainians are trying to recapture all positions to the north of the settlement of Rodinska. They're trying to recapture everything along this yellow line. If Ukrainians can do this during the next several days, then from these positions, Ukrainians will be able to attack the settlement of Novoekonomichne and to attack the settlement of Rodinska from behind. So if Ukrainians can do this, then of course they would be able to unblock Ukrainian contingent on the territory of the city of Pokrovsk, and they will be able to continue fighting for this territory. Of course, Russians see the situation, and that is why the Russians understand that the only way to stop Ukrainians and not to allow them to finish this task is to attack in the area of the settlement of Shakhova. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians made lots of attempts to attack this territory where the significant number of infantry fighting vehicles, tanks and so on. Ukrainians were repelling this attack using drones. In this video we can see up to 10 vehicles in different parts of this, let's say, area trying to attack positions of the armored forces of Ukraine. The Ukrainians were attacking them with drones. Several vehicles were damaged and destroyed. We don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to answer the settlement of Shakhova, but a few geolocations were geolocated right on the outskirts of the city. So it seems that the battle for Shakhova Kurakhova is a decisive battle not just for this pocket but for the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration. Ukrainians will try to unblock the armored forces of Ukraine stuck in the area of Pokrovsk agglomeration, and the Russians will try to do everything they can with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to do this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in Novopavlovka direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. The Russians, according to information we have, began advancing in the direction of the settlement by the name of Mizhova. So this is the settlement we are talking about, which is located to the north of the settlement by the name of Novopavlovka. By these attacks, by this offensive operation, the Russians are trying to get as close as possible to the road TO428 that Ukrainians used to support their contingent on the territory of the settlement of Novopavlovka. As for the Zaporozhye direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special. The Russians control the situation and continue advancing along the line of combat contact. The Ukrainians suffer huge losses and are trying to stabilize the situation. But as of the 28th of October of 2025, the Ukrainians still haven't managed to do this. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.